From the City of Angels near the Pacific Ocean, good morning, good evening, wherever you may be across the nation, around the world. I'm George Norrie. Welcome to Coast AM. Later tonight, the power of miracles. And happy birthday to Coast listener Brian in Indianapolis. Have a great one, Brian. Here's what's happening. As we reported last night when we were on the air, a huge earthquake killing now more than 4,300 people across a swath of Turkey and northwestern Syria. Freezing winter weather out there adding to the plight of the thousands left injured or homeless, hampering efforts to find survivors. What a complete disaster. We should help them as much as we can. Aerial divisions in Southern California have continued to patrol the skies intermittently in search for Julian Sands as efforts to find the British actor reached the third week. The San Bernardino County Sheriff's Department said such efforts would normally be downgraded to a passive search after 10 days, but the plans had been extended as ongoing bad weather continued to hamper operations. You might not know his name, Julian Sands, but if you Google him, you'll definitely recognize his face. He was reported missing on January 13th after he failed to return from a hike in the Mount Baldy region of the San Gabriel Mountains. Numerous searches for the actor have been undertaken on foot and by air by local and state-level agencies. Nothing on his disappearance. 3 weeks now. Not good. United Nations Chief Antonio Guterres has warned nations that he fears the likelihood of further escalation in the Russia-Ukraine conflict means the world is heading towards a wider war there. The remains of the China spy flight shot down by the U.S. over the Atlantic Ocean this past weekend, now heading to the FBI processing lab in Quantico, Virginia. The balloon remnants are set to be analyzed in the coming days. Peter Davenport from the National UFO Reporting Center checked in with us tonight, and he's been reporting on these balloons, he said, for about 5 years. People have been seeing these. A U.S. economist famous for predicting the 2008 housing crash believes that home prices could plunge another 15% this year. Dell, the computer company, plans to lay off roughly 5% of its workforce. That's 6,500 employees that'll be out of work. And more than 4 years after Instagram's founders left the company, they're back with a new app. Kevin Systrom and Mark Krieger announced the launch of Artifact, an app that promises a personalized news feed powered by artificial intelligence. Lauren Weinstein, our expert on the Internet, with us. What's this all mean, Lauren?
You know, George, it's a bit difficult for me to find the right words to explain how utterly unexcited I am about this announcement.
It's not like Instagram, is it?
Because, frankly, this Artifact app sounds so much like various other new apps that have either recently launched or soon will, most of whom claim they're going to find the news stories or articles or other content that users really want and how they're using AI and blah, blah, blah. And frankly, we've reached a point now where just throwing around the letters AI doesn't really impress most observers. And while this app reportedly will concentrate more on text rather than on videos like, say, TikTok does, for example, and yeah, focusing on text is nice to the extent that anybody still has the ability to actually read. But overall, whether or not something like this is going to make a big splash, given the changes in the social media dynamic, seems like far from a sure bet. And even beyond social media applications of this sort, the whole area of AI is now entering a rather bizarre phase where everyone is rushing around trying to deploy AI-based chatbots. And again, exactly what AI means in these cases can be highly variable. So we know about ChatGPT, and in a couple of days, Google will reportedly show their Bard AI chatbot. And there's others coming from other firms and organizations. So we're pretty definitely being sucked into the AI chatbot hype zone right now. And that's not to say that these technologies won't be very important going forward. In one form or another, various of them will be. But from where we're all sitting right now, it's impossible to accurately postulate who the winners and losers will be and in what forms these technologies will become important rather than mainly right now as demonstration toys. So basically my advice on all this is to take everything you're hearing from the various firms about their AI chat-related systems with a healthy dose of skepticism, keeping in mind that there's sort of a panic rush going on in the industry right now with everyone trying to push out product quickly for fear of being left behind. And as we all know, rushed products, more often than not, can have all manner of problems that in some cases will take years to work out and sometimes never really work properly. So keep your eyes open, but I do recommend definitely not holding your breath.
And, Lauren, these two seem to have the Midas touch, though. Do you think they're going to hit a home run?
The industry is changing. The people that have the Midas touch in 1 year might strike out the next year. And you want an example? Look what's happened in crypto, right?
Yeah, good point.
I was just reading that reportedly last year's big game, as they call it, had 5 crypto ads. Very expensive ads, those are. This year, reportedly again, there will be none in the big game. And in that time, a year ago, the people that were pushing those technologies were called geniuses, and now there aren't going to be any ads at all. What does that tell you?
You got it. Thanks, Lauren. Appreciate it. More than 400 food products sold under dozens of brand names were recalled due to possible listeria contamination. The recall by Fresh Ideation Food Group includes ready-to-eat sandwiches, salads, yogurts, wraps, and other products sold in 9 states and Washington, D.C. From January 24th through January 30th, the recalled foods distributed in Connecticut, the District of Columbia, Maryland, Massachusetts, New Jersey, New York, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, South Carolina, and Virginia. What else has been going on in the skies other than balloons? Let's check in with astronomer Stephen Cates, Dr. Sky. Hi, Stephen.
Hello there, George. We'll have a little update, too, a little bit in the program here on the Chinese surveillance balloon, too. But we begin in space. Jupiter, George, is now still the king of the planets, 92 moons. We find out that recent discoveries tell us of a total now of 92 moons around the giant planet Jupiter. 12 new discoveries, mostly small, but a few miles in diameter. Some taking 340 days to orbit Jupiter, but many are in what we call retrograde orbits, while closer ones are in what we call prograde orbits, so they go in different directions. Some of the outer moons are of the classification called the Himalaya group, while the most distant ones are in the Carpo group, while the more distant ones, as we mentioned before, one in particular called Valetudo. This incredible moon, George, orbits some 11 million miles from Jupiter, but Saturn recently had the total with the most moons of 82 moons. 52 years ago, on this date, February 6th of 1971, Apollo 14 astronaut and first American in space, Alan Shepard, actually hit golf balls on the surface of the moon. But here's my version of the Chinese surveillance balloon with some details that weren't reported very widely. While not the first of its kind, we know, the recently downed Chinese surveillance balloon has a most interesting shoot-down story, George, to be told, as F-22 Raptors from the 1st Fighter Wing at Langley Air Force Base in Virginia, their motto, out Penseri, out Mori, which means and translates to conquer or die, they're responsible for one-third of the Air Force combat F-22 Raptors. We know they scored a hit on the Chinese balloon with an AIM-9X Sidewinder missile. But here's the interesting part. The call sign for the Raptors was Frank 1 and Frank 2. Why? Symbolic of the legacy of Lieutenant Frank Luke Jr., of World War I fame, the famous Arizona balloon buster, the namesake of Luke Air Force Base, which I sit only 4 miles away here as we do this report here on the radio show. I've been observing, George, these high-altitude balloons like this from Arizona for years, but none with the alleged capability of the CCP balloons. We continue on in space with new heavy-lift rockets. We find out more powerful rockets are in store for 2023 and beyond. We all know the Saturn V moon rocket had a lift thrust of some 7.5 million pounds of thrust. The recent SLS Artemis rocket had a lift load that could take 8.8 million pounds of thrust as it got off the ground. But SpaceX's large Starship rocket, the giant Stack, will produce a thrust of, get a load of this, some 16 million pounds of thrust. Other massive rockets to come are Japan's H-3 heavy-lift rocket, ESA's Ariane 6, and the United Launch Alliance's Vulcan Centaur heavy-lift rocket. We wrap it up with the live sky. George, how about that beautiful snow moon? It's amazing.
Gorgeous.
And you can still see the remnants tonight. But here's an interesting fact. It's the smallest of the moons of the entire year, called a micromoon. Comet ZTF and Mars will get closer as the comet nears Mars on the night of Friday, February the 10th, and Saturday, February the 11th, just a few degrees from the red planet. To plot it, get your binoculars out in dark skies. Go, of course, to theskylive.com. But a suggestion, observe Mars before moonrise on both nights. We love the emails, drskyshow@gmail.com. What do we say? And we mean it. Always remember to keep your eyes to the skies. Simply, I'm your navigator, and the show's on the highway to the heavens. And what, George, only 40 days or so to our big event in Sedona. Looking forward to talking with you, the audience, and all the friends of this great radio show.
All right, my friend. Thank you. We'll talk to you next week. Dr. Sky, Stephen Cates. Up next, what's an update on the search for extraterrestrial intelligence? Seth Shostak with us next on Coast to Coast AM. And welcome back to Coast. George Norrie with you. Seth Shostak's back with us, Senior Astronomer Institute Fellow at the SETI Institute, degrees in physics, astronomy from Princeton University and Caltech. He has a long history of research in radio astronomy and in the search for extraterrestrial intelligence group, or SETI. Seth has written more than 600 popular articles on science and technology and hosts radio shows and podcasts, The Big Picture Science. Seth, welcome back, my friend. How are you?
I'm just fine, George, and it's a pleasure to hear your voice on the telephone instead of the radio for a change.
By the way, I ran into a fellow who knows you this weekend in Beverly Hills, but he says he's not sure you know him. He worked on the space shuttle, and all he did all night was talk about Seth Shostak. His name's Paul Laszlo. Do you know him?
Oh, I think I do.
Older guy, white hair.
Well, I mean, you can say that about many of the people.
Yeah, that's true.
Now, but yeah, Paul Laszlo. Well, yeah. I hope he didn't say anything.
No, it was
negative.
all very positive and stuff, but it was cool. Apparently, his wife Mila listens to the show quite often.
Really?
And has heard you on the program, and he came up to me and introduced himself and mentioned you like he was your best friend.
My goodness, well, maybe he is.
Small world. What's new at SETI?
Well, there are a couple of interesting new developments. In fact, there are always some new developments. One is the renewed attempt to introduce artificial intelligence into our search for signals coming from, faraway worlds. So that's proceeding apace, and that may actually help. We can get into that if you like. The other thing is that we're also going to be using the Very Large Array, which is an instrument of about 27 antennas down in central New Mexico, normally used for radio astronomy, but we're going to sort of siphon off some of the data being collected by that array and search those data for signals that might tell us somebody's out there.
Where are the head offices for SETI, Seth?
Well, the SETI Institute, mind you, SETI is just, of course, a discipline. It's kind of a generic acronym for Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence. But the SETI Institute is located here, where I'm sitting in glamorous Mountain View, California, in the Silicon Valley.
Now, when people come into work there, what does it look like? Are there gizmos and gadgets all over the place?
Yeah, you would think that. In fact, many people do think that, and I occasionally get requests to give tours, which I'm always happy to do, but I warn anybody who wants to take a tour that they're only going to be a little bit disappointed, because you walk in and it looks like many of the other tilt-up buildings here in the Silicon Valley. It's just a bunch of offices, a few cubes here and there, and you look around and you say, well, what the heck? That's because where the people are sitting is not where the antennas are sitting. The antennas are up in Northern California, about 300 miles north of San Francisco, at our Allen Telescope Array, and we're going to start using some other antennas as well. But the antennas are not here. And the reason for that is not that they're bad company, but I guess we're bad company for them, because, in fact, the electronics that, everybody has these days cause interference. So, if you put the antennas in a highly densely populated area, like a city or a suburb even, it's not so good for looking for faint signals.
Seth, you've always been a believer that the ETs are out there. You've not been a believer that they've been here. Is that changing at all with all this information that's creeping out?
Well, George, I hope this isn't going to disappoint you. I hope it isn't going to ruin your entire evening, but I don't think so. Despite the fact that, one of the most interesting stories of the past year or two has been, in fact, the release of those Navy videos.
That's right.
And so forth and so on.
The Tic Tacs.
Yeah, the Tic Tac videos. And, for a lot of people, those are convincing evidence that something's in the skies above our heads. Well, there are things up in the skies above our heads, but I don't think it's alien spacecraft.
But you do believe they're out there?
Well, yes, definitely out there. I mean, look, space is big, very big, as they say in The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. And, if they're not out there, my gosh, trillions of planets just in our own galaxy, hundreds of billions of other galaxies, each with trillions of planets. I mean, the numbers are so huge that it's really difficult to believe that this is the only interesting place.
Oh, you once said something to me 20-plus years ago, too, that the primordial soup out there is the same.
Yes, that's right. That's right. Maybe that's somehow comforting that you can go to any restaurant in the universe and order the same primordial soup. Primordial soup just refers to, of course, the ingredients that you find in any ocean in the cosmos, really. I mean, it's dissolved rock and dirt and stuff like that. But the ingredients for life you can find just about any place there's, liquid water. And there are a lot of places with liquid water. So unless there's something really, really special about Earth, then, you should expect a lot of life out there.
How is SETI starting to use AI, artificial intelligence?
Well, what we're doing is using it to sort of examine the data and find signals that otherwise might not be obvious, right? You point the antennas at some nearby star system, presumably one that also is known to have planets, but, most stars have planets. And then you're looking for some signal in all the cosmic noise your antenna is picking up. And in the old days, you would do that with a very straightforward, simple algorithm, if I can use that term. And, it might find it and it might not. But by using artificial intelligence, you can make a far deeper search. Maybe the way to look at it is to say, imagine going to a South Sea island with the hope of digging up some buried treasure. And, you could take a teaspoon, but you could also take something a little more powerful like a skip loader, and maybe you'd find that buried treasure a little more quickly.
The people at SETI, including yourself, if a signal is ever received, what do you expect it to be like?
Well, of course, we don't know what the aliens might find interesting to transmit. So what we try and do with our experiments is look for the most general kind of signal that is indicative of a transmitter. I mean, we're not looking for the kind of noise, white noise, really, that you get from a quasar or a pulsar or any of those sort of natural noise emitters, natural radio transmitters in the universe. So we're looking for signals that are, at one spot on the radio dial. That is to say, they're at a given frequency, just like this radio show is, right? That's
Sure.
because it's made by a transmitter, and a transmitter has to be tuned to some given frequency. So that's kind of what we look for when we're hoping to find ET on the air. But if you're looking at a quasar or some other natural radio transmitter, it's everywhere on the dial, and so that tells you, this is not some alien device. This is just nature.
Will it be vocabulary of like Klingon or something different like that, or will it be some kind of message or something?
Well, of course, it's very hard to say. To begin with, finding the message is a lot harder than just finding the signal. The first thing you want to do is actually find where on the dial the signal is, and then you can go back and, with more refined equipment, try and find the message, which might be, as you say, it might be, I don't know who, it could be the aliens' top 40, or it could be a news broadcaster, it could be, nothing but a beacon signal that's just letting out a radio whine into the cosmos for navigation purposes, or who knows what. We don't know, but what we would know if we found any of those kinds of signals right away is that, well, who knows what they're saying? I mean, maybe it's their top 40, but, at least there's somebody out there who's clever enough to build a transmitter. And that's what you're really looking for, at least in the first instance, not to understand what their programming is, but just to know that they are able to make a broadcast. And
it's highly likely it's not a signal sent to us or anybody else out in the cosmos. It's within themselves, right?
Could be, yeah. I mean, of course, we don't know. but it's a little unlikely that it's whatever it is, a signal that's made or intended for us, because unless they're very close, when I say very close, I mean, astronomically speaking, within 50 light years or something like that. That's close by astronomy standards. Unless they're very close, they don't know about Homo sapiens. They don't know we're here, because our signals, our television signals, and for that matter, even coast-to-coast FM, if that actually exists.
We have FM, we have AM, we have everything.
All the M's. Okay. Well,
hold on for a second, Seth. We're at the bottom hour. We'll come back. We'll pick it up right there when we come back. And welcome back to Coast to Coast. George Norrie with you, along with Seth Shostak. We're going to take calls with Seth next hour here on Coast to Coast. Seth, we were talking about the kind of signal that it might be required to get, and it could be anything, I guess, right?
Well, that's right. I mean, just imagine asking somebody from the 18th century. They're going to invent something called radio. What sort of programming do you think they'll broadcast? Nobody would know.
If a signal is received and we don't think it's being beamed to us specifically, as you were saying, what would it be like in your opinion? What do you think it would be like?
Well, that's really a guess, and it's a total guess, because we've only had radio for 100 years, so there may be uses for radio that crop up in another 1,000 years that we come up with that everybody will say, oh, well, that's obvious, but it isn't obvious to us today. I mean, obviously, radio is a great way to send information from one place to another, and you can send it from one world to another, too, because radio goes right through the vacuum of space without any problem. So just ask yourself, what is radio being used for here on Earth? And I don't just mean, AM radio or FM radio or anything like that. Radio also includes television and, the Internet, all that kind of stuff. So it's used to send bits of info from one place to another, and as far as what's going to be in those bits, well, that depends on the local civilization, the local culture. Is it going to be the news? Is it going to be entertainment? It's probably going to be all those sorts of things, actually.
Do you think they've tapped into artificial intelligence? What do you think they might have?
Yeah, well, I think that they probably do invent artificial intelligence, because it seems like a very, sort of obvious thing to develop once your technology allows you to do it. I mean, I have natural intelligence, and frankly, George, I don't recommend it. I mean, it's not particularly good, and it doesn't get better with age. So I think that if you can build a machine that can think as well as, a soft, squishy brain can think, you're going to do it. Because if you don't do it, the guy across the street might do it, and that puts you at a disadvantage. So sure, I figured that, in fact, the majority of the intelligence in the universe, and we've talked about this in the past, actually, that the majority of the cosmic intelligence out there is artificial intelligence. It isn't, animal intelligence.
What do you think of the possibilities that the ETs could be robots or cyborgs?
Well, they could be. I mean, robots, there's somewhat of a difference between, of course, a robot and artificial intelligence. You can have artificial intelligence that's just a box that's sitting on your desk or somebody's desk, whereas robots, you usually think of robots as being able to either move around pretty easily or else, put cars together or stuff like that. So robots have a mechanical component to them. They have some sort of ability to do stuff, to build stuff, to whatever. And whereas artificial intelligence doesn't need to do any of that sort of thing. I mean, there are plenty of sci-fi stories where you have essentially a big faceless block of something sitting in the corner somewhere. I mean, it could be pretty big, actually. And it's artificial intelligence, and, you come in and you feed in a question to it like, what's the meaning of life and everything else, and it comes back 42 or whatever it comes back with. That's artificial intelligence, but it's not a robot. So I think you're going to have both kinds of things. I'm hoping that we get a robot that can, make the bed. I would like that.
How many years have you been with SETI now, Seth?
Well, I joined the SETI Institute. Gosh, I hate to say this. Well, maybe I don't hate to say it, but it is true that I joined in 1990, I think it was. Long time.
How did you get recruited?
Well, let me think about that.
How did they come get you?
Yeah, well, they're always trying to get me. it was because I actually lived here in Mountain View, California, which is where the SETI Institute is, and somebody at the Institute found out about that. My background was in radio astronomy, and that's a field that's actually very similar to SETI, at least in terms of the instrumentation, in terms of the equipment that you use. So somebody at the NASA SETI program, back then it was a NASA program, they said, oh, well, this guy Seth is, around. And many of the people that worked at the NASA SETI program knew me personally. And they just called me up one day and they said, you want a job here?
Was it 96 or 97? I talked to you from my local show when you were at Arecibo in Puerto Rico.
Probably. It was around that time, that's for sure. I thought it was a little bit earlier than that, maybe by a couple of years. But indeed, it was in the 1990s.
Yeah, I didn't start locally until 96. So it'd have to be right around then.
Yeah.
That was fun.
It was fun, and it certainly entertained the telescope operators down in Puerto Rico, to see me sitting there talking to, I don't know, tens of millions of people in the United States on the radio.
It's an incredible possibility that one day we're going to find out what's going on up there. How do you think SETI will announce it to us?
Well, there's a lot of speculation that I hear, in any case, from people who say, well, okay, so Seth, you guys are looking for a signal, coming from the sky that is produced by some other society, some other culture. But if you found it, would you even tell us? A lot of people think we wouldn't even make it public.
I think you would.
We would have very little choice about that.
You'd be on this show like that day.
I hope so. But, yeah, so, it would be made public right away. And, of course, that isn't to say that you would know what they're saying, assuming they're saying anything. All you know is that, well, there's a signal coming in, and it's coming from that star system over there. Look at the night sky. It's right over there, and it's 50 or 100 light years away, whatever the distance is, and that's pretty much all you would know in the beginning. After that, of course, everybody would want to try and figure out if there's any information they could decode. Is there any way of knowing what the aliens are taking the time and the trouble to tell us? And maybe, in fact, most likely, some people would say, well, let's broadcast something back to them. Now, all that may or may not strike you as a reasonable thing to do, but keep in mind that it's very likely that if you pick up a signal, it's not from the next star system over, but it's from something, 50 or 100 light years away. So it isn't that there's going to be, speedy communication if it takes 50 or 100 years for a signal to go one way and then the same amount of time to come back the other way.
They would probably have the technology to ascertain that this planet way out there, this blue planet, is close to its star, has an oxygen level that could support life, because life could be the same everywhere. They would probably know that we could be a hotspot.
Yeah, well, that's right. I mean, all they need is a decent budget for their astronomers, and they could look in the direction from where the signal is coming. In particular, our solar system, find the little blue planet and analyze the atmosphere of our planet. That's just straightforward astronomy. And they would say, gee, there's a lot of oxygen in that atmosphere. And you don't find oxygen in the atmosphere of just any planet, right? The only reason there's oxygen in our atmosphere is because of photosynthesis, is because of all those plants outside the front door. And they would know that. So they would know that there's life here. So if they said, okay, well, there's obviously some sort of biology going on that planet, why don't we fire up the radio receivers and see if we can pick up any signals? And they might be able to do that and prove that they're not only plants, but, also intelligent critters.
They may have already done that.
They may have already done that. They may have, if they're close enough. We've only really been broadcasting into space at frequencies and at powers that they could easily pick up since about the Second World War. So those signals are, 70 or 80 light years out into space, and there are quite a few stars within that distance, but, hundreds, maybe a few thousand.
What about the old-time radio shows and stuff? They're out there somewhere, right?
Well, they are and they aren't. I mean, the old-time radio shows were on AM radio, like Coast to Coast.
Yep.
And as good as Coast to Coast may be, AM radio is actually not so good at getting past the ionosphere in our own atmosphere. So even if you were just on the moon or Mars, you'd have a hard time picking up AM radio because of that difficulty with the ionosphere. FM radio would be somewhat easier.
Interesting take on all this.
Disappointing.
It's exciting, isn't it?
Well, of course it's exciting. I mean, this is the generation, our generation. This is a generation that's most likely going to finally prove that there's somebody out there. And, that's an interesting thing to know.
The late Stephen Hawking, the physicist, has warned the world, be careful of sending signals out from Earth because you don't know who's going to get them. What do you think of that?
Well, right. This particular comment is known as what's called the dark forest problem. That if you're in a dark forest, if you're in a thick forest or whatever, a dense forest, it's not a good idea to shout because you don't know what's out there, and you may just bring something down on you that wants to eat you for dinner.
That's right.
So the same thing might be true if we broadcast out into space. That there's some nearby civilization that picks up those signals and says, well, there's obviously some sort of intriguing biology going on that planet, and we don't need the competition, so let's wipe them out. I mean, that sounds like a science fiction story, and to my mind, it pretty much is a science fiction story, but it's not impossible that you could have that sort of Guardians of the Galaxy, kind of mindset where we're not going to let anybody else get too far advanced because that could be bad news for us. So, what do you do about that? Do you shut down all the FM radio transmitters and all the television and the radar and everything else that we're doing to broadcast our presence to the rest of the galaxy? Or do you just say, look, I can't deal with that. I mean, if they're going to come and wipe us out, gosh darn, that'd be bad news, but I'm not going to shut down all our communications on Earth just to forestall that.
Seth, what are the odds that we're the only ones in this universe?
Well, of course, I have to look in the back of the book to actually know, George, but we don't know. But there is something in science which says that you may think you're special, but you're probably not. It's called the principle of mediocrity, and it just means that, if you exist, there are probably other things that exist that are not so different from you, right? So here we are on this little watery planet, and we're relatively intelligent and all that sort of thing. And, what are the chances that this is the only place where that's true? That would make us so darn special that it really, causes most scientists to sort of wince because they know that when you think you're special, you really are mostly wrong.
Pretty dramatic. Seth Shostak's website is SETI.org, linked up at coasttocoastam.com. We're going to take calls with Seth next hour, so jump on board. If you could solve any dilemma with SETI or otherwise, what would that be?
Well, I mean, there are a lot of dilemmas that, of course, are particular to Earth or to our own society and so forth. I mean, you can think of plenty of things. World peace or solving various social problems and so forth. But I think the most interesting thing that SETI offers is showing that we really aren't so special, that what's happened here on planet Earth has happened elsewhere, that there are other beings out there, whether they're biological or synthetic or whatever they are, that there's more to the universe than just the hot, dead existence of stars and interstellar gas and all those things, that there's actually stuff out there that might be self-aware, that might be intelligence, and that would be really interesting to know.
Why do you believe that we have not been visited, Seth?
Well,
surely they have the technology to get here.
Well, some of them probably do, yes. Although, it's hard to go from one star to another. I mean, it's easy to say they have warp drive and all, but, if you go to the patent office in D.C. and look up warp drive, you're probably not going to find too much because nobody knows what it is.
No.
On the other hand, I mean, it's, as I say, it's not impossible to travel between the stars, at least if you're willing to take a long time, right, going, maybe 10% the speed of light or whatever your rocket can manage. It still takes a long time. But if you're a machine, if you're a synthetic intelligence, maybe you don't care that it takes a long time because you're going to live forever anyhow. I just think that just to know that they're out there, just to know your place in all of this, is a good thing. It's like studying history. What good does that do you? Well, it puts you, it gives you context for your own existence.
Once you reach some ability of communication with the others, what would it be like? Can we transmit messages to them and them to us?
Well, you could. I mean, the real question is, okay, you transmitted it, but are they going to understand it? And if you transmit it in, I don't know, Pig Latin or something.
Or pictures?
Yeah, pictures. That's always my favorite approach. Send pictures. They could be 1-bit pictures for people who know what that means. I mean, they could be very simple pictures, like the kinds you see in the comics. I mean, they're just line drawings and so forth. It'd be pretty easy to send those things. And you might say, well, they're not going to understand, Donald Duck or anything like that. But maybe they won't. But you could send them sort of a textbook for how to understand pictures, right? You send them first a picture of the Earth or this solar system or something that they will understand. And then from that, you build up the vocabulary with other pictures. So that's the way I would get started on, sending them information that they could eventually read. I can't imagine that it would take very long before you had taught them enough about how you translate ideas into writing that you might be able to send them the Washington Post, and they might get something out of that.
If they don't already have it.
Maybe they're responsible for it. Who knows?
Frank Drake, what did he think?
Well, Frank, he, by the way, for those who don't know, Frank Drake was the guy who started the whole SETI enterprise in 1960. He did the first modern SETI experiment. He died in last September, actually, and I have to say personally, I really miss Frank. I think many people miss Frank. He was not only a very, very clever guy with a lot of good ideas, but he was also really a very, very nice guy, and the two don't necessarily go together. But he figured the aliens could be of all sorts of temperaments and interests and abilities. I mean, I don't think that he thought that they were all going to be like this or like that.
I think he was right, Seth. Indeed. We're going to come back and take calls with you next on Coast to Coast. This hour we'll take your calls with Seth Shostak from the SETI Institute as we talk about the possibility of extraterrestrial signals and life in this universe. And welcome back to Coast. George Norrie with Seth Shostak. Seth, Frank Drake, of course, responsible for SETI. What did he believe? Did he ever say privately?
Well, you mean in terms of the, how many aliens might be out there?
Or if they had already come here, what did he think?
Well, I don't recall him ever saying anything about them coming here. I don't think he believed that. But he did most definitely believe they were out there. And he even, would estimate that the number of civilizations in the Milky Way galaxy, our galaxy, that were out there was, something like 10,000. And that was just a popular number at the time, and it's one that he thought was as good as any other number. So that's the only number I ever heard from him on this matter.
All right, let's go to the phones. Jeff in Ferguson, Missouri, to get us started. Hey, Jeff, go ahead.
Thank you. How's it going this evening?
Everything's good. Thanks.
I got a two-part question if there's time. The first part is it possible SETI might have passed over signals that could be characterized as radio contact? And the second one is the SETI at Home program ever going to come back? And I'll take the answers off the air. Thanks.
Okay, I'll give them to you on the air, Jeff. Could SETI have missed signals? Of course it could, right? I mean, it's like, you're looking for that buried treasure on that South Sea island. You could easily, walk right over it without knowing, because it's, buried 3 feet under the surface of the beach or whatever. Yes, you could miss things. That's certainly possible, and there's not much you can do about that except to make a search as as good as you can make it, based on whatever technology and funding or whatever you have. So that's certainly a possibility. And the other question, what was your second question, Jeff? Give it to me again.
Jeff hung up.
Oh, he did? Doggone it. I'm going to answer it with 42. Maybe that was the answer. I don't know.
But he was basically asking about the possibility that it's out there and what we all think. Of which is what we've been talking about tonight.
That it's out there or not out there?
That it's out there.
Yeah, well, I agree with that. Obviously, I do. We wouldn't do SETI experiments if we didn't think there was something to be found. So, and I don't think that's a particularly radical point of view either.
How long do you think it's been out there?
Well,
I mean, we're 4 billion years old as a planet. God knows when we started.
Right. We're 4 billion years old. That's true. However, the universe is like 13 billion years old.
That's right. Somebody got a head start on us.
Well, yeah, most solar systems are older than ours, actually. So, maybe the aliens, they could be billions of years more advanced than we are if they'd gotten started earlier, and there's been plenty of time for them to get started earlier. We're the kind of the kids in the galaxy, actually.
That is so true. Next up, Brian in Indianapolis. Is this you, the birthday boy? Happy birthday again,
hey,
Brian.
George. Yes, sir. Today, big 61.
Good for you.
Are you kidding me? Hey, Seth, nice talking to you. hey, George, real quick. I talked Chris into letting me buy a Orion BT100 binocular telescopes and a big old stand to put it on, man. I mean,
you're going to love it.
Oh, it's awesome. Hey, Seth, let me ask you a question, kind of on the flip side of the coin of what Jeff asked. The algorithms that you use to try to find these signals, how close have you come to deciphering a signal through these algorithms? And have you had the same signal more than once?
Yeah.
Just explain that to us.
Well, Brian, the facts are you can't tell how close you've come unless you succeed, right? I mean, all you can say is, well, we didn't find them, right? But you don't know whether you were ever close. So that one's a toughie. But, all you really can say on the basis of the experiments that we do is that, well, we looked in this direction over this range of the radio dial, these frequencies, and we didn't find any signals stronger than whatever the number is. That's all you can say. And it may be that you were really, really close to picking something up, and if you only had 10% more sensitivity, you would have found the signal. Or it could be that you're way, way off base and that, you would require 1,000 times more sensitivity than you've got to find them. But you don't know if you don't find them. That's just the bottom line there.
What would that moment be when you get a signal and you know that it's from some intelligent civilization?
Well, you get signals all the time. We've talked about that on occasion. Because you're using big antenna arrays. We use mostly the Allen telescope array, although we're going to be using the very large array down in New Mexico too. But these are very sensitive instruments, and so you're able to find signals that are very, very weak. And if you don't find them, well, what does that mean? It might be that that your sensitivity is still not good enough, but you don't know by how much. You don't know whether you've got to improve everything by a factor of 2 or a factor of 202. You really don't know. So it's like it's the same situation that I guess Chris Columbus would have had, after he had spent 3 weeks sailing across the North Atlantic and hadn't found anything. And you said to him, well, do you think you're close or not? And he would have no idea.
Seth is also an author. He's got a few books out there, including Confessions of an Alien Hunter, Life in the Universe. Is the Life in the Universe the last book you wrote?
No, Confessions of an Alien Hunter is the last one.
Oh, they told me that was in 2009. That was earlier, huh?
Yeah, maybe it's time for me to write a new book.
Updated. Let's go to Janet in Manhattan. Take it away. Hi, Janet.
Oh, hi, Dr. Shostak. Here's a question I've been wondering about for a while. I'm getting a little closer to understanding it. You alluded to the fact that the ionosphere affects AM radio reception and not FM radio reception. First of all, why is that? Is that because of the wavelength or the frequency? And my question is, what is it that the ionosphere does? What does the sun do when it's around? How does it affect the ionosphere so that I cannot get a whole bunch of AM stations? And the minute the sun goes down, all of a sudden my radio explodes with 20 or 30 stations from all over the place, the Eastern Seaboard, Canada, and everywhere. I'm in New York, and I'm hearing stuff from Washington and Baltimore and Boston and Toronto. What is that the sun does to the ionosphere?
It's
and
the
I
bounce.
will take the answer on the radio. Thank you.
Okay, Janet. Well, all right. That's a kind of a. I mean, that's a question that we could spend the rest of the hour talking about. But basically, what happens is that the sun causes a change in the ionosphere that changes its properties, right? And the properties that it changes turn out to be those that determine whether it can reflect signals back to Earth, right? Now, Coast to Coast AM, it's an AM broadcast.
And FM.
And FM, sorry.
And satellite now.
Probably. All right.
And internet.
Oh, my God. All right.
We're everywhere, Seth.
We're everywhere. Sounds like Chicken Man. Wasn't he everywhere? Okay, but let's just talk about AM radio for a moment. AM radio gets refracted. It gets bounced, if you will, off the ionosphere, at least at night. And during the day, the sun messes up the ionosphere in such a way that it doesn't bounce, and the signals just go right out into space. And that's why, if you're driving around in your car late at night or even early at night when the sun's down and you're tuning the AM dial, you might pick up stations that are thousands of miles away.
Especially if they have that 50,000 watter.
Yeah, if they're clear channel stations with a lot of power, 50 or 100,000 watts, then the signal goes up, it hits the ionosphere, and it bounces back to Earth, where it probably bounces again up into the ionosphere and then bounces back down again. And so you might be able to pick it up on the bounce quite some distance, right? FM radio, on the other hand, just goes right through the ionosphere, and so you're not going to get a bounce. And that's why FM stations you can usually only pick up when you're very close to whatever city the transmitter is in.
Are they picking up television signals? Assuming they.
The aliens?
Mm-hmm.
Well, they could, although if you work out because, television signals are pretty high frequency. They're higher frequency than radio, and as a consequence, they go right out into space, right? That's a good thing. Otherwise, you would have a hard time if you're still using an antenna to pick up your TV shows. You would have a hard time because, shows being broadcast by transmitters in the next city would probably interfere. But, in fact, those are the kinds of signals that could be picked up, although, obviously the television broadcasters are not so interested in, the audience of aliens, so they don't really aim any of their signals upward toward the sky. They usually aim them toward the horizon. They want to reach everybody in suburbia.
Yeah, the advertisers don't care too much about what's going on way up there in space.
Yeah, the aliens have a poor record on purchasing products.
Let's go west of the Rockies. John in Los Angeles. Hi, John. You there? Nope, he's not. Let's go next to WC in Texas. Hello, WC.
Yes, sir. Mr. Seth, I was wanting to ask you about the SETI at home.
Oh, right.
Do you have that?
Yeah.
Oh, that was his other question.
Yeah, that was the other question. All right, we forgot that. Yeah, SETI at home. Very popular screensaver that was developed actually based on an idea from a guy from Seattle, but it was developed at the University of California, Berkeley, their SETI group. And they ran that program for years, program in the sense of, people could download a screensaver and reduce some SETI data. But they stopped doing that, maybe 3 or 4 years ago. And the reason they stopped doing it is because it requires a certain amount of babysitting. You have to have one person, at least one person, but one person minimum, whose entire job is, dealing with the people who have downloaded your screensaver. And, one person might not be a big employee count for General Motors, but for SETI projects, one person is a very big expense. And so eventually the University of California, Berkeley guys decided that they could no longer afford that expense, and so SETI at Home was stopped as a program. It might come back. It might, but it's entirely dependent on money.
Were you once funded by NASA?
This SETI program was a NASA program. When I joined the SETI Institute in 1990, It was a NASA program. All our meetings were over at the NASA Ames Research Center, which is pretty close to where I'm sitting here in the Silicon Valley. There was some real budget. The budget that NASA was spending on SETI was, several millions of dollars per year. But that was killed in 1993 by Congress. It was a senator from Nevada who killed SETI, NASA SETI, and suddenly funding went from a few $1 million a year to zero.
Was that Harry Reid at the time?
It was not Harry Reid. No. His name was Richard Bryan. His name probably still is Richard Bryan, and he was a Democratic senator from Nevada. He was from Nevada, but it wasn't Harry Reid.
Next up, we go to Jeff in North Carolina. Jeffrey, take it away.
Hi, George. Hi, Seth. This is Jeff from North Carolina.
Hi, Jeff.
Seth, I have two questions for you. They're related. I'll get to them quickly. One, there was a peer-reviewed technical paper published by the Future of Humanity Institute called Dissolving the Fermi Paradox, written by Anders Sandberg, Eric Drexler, and Toby Ord, all well-known futurists. Eric Drexler is the nanotech guy. And their conclusion was, quote, substantial probability that we are alone in our galaxy, 53% to 99%, and there's a probability that we are alone in our observable universe, 39% to 85%. Quote, probably extremely far away and quite possibly beyond our cosmological horizon and forever unreachable. I was wondering if you had a chance to review that paper and what your comments are on it, and I have a follow-up question.
Okay. Well, I didn't review that particular paper, but I've certainly heard of other papers that have reached essentially the same conclusion by saying the fact that we don't see any obvious evidence of aliens, and that's the situation so far, leads to this question of, well, wait a minute. On the one hand, you say aliens could be all over the place, and yet we don't see them, and that's the Fermi paradox. And one explanation for that is that there just aren't any aliens, but there are plenty of other explanations. And it could be that we're not seeing them because we're not tuned in at the right frequency on the dial, or we don't have enough sensitivity, or we're not looking for the right kind of signals, and so forth and so on. So given all those possible explanations for the fact that we haven't found the aliens, I think it would be daring to the point of maybe being actually not a good idea to say that just because we haven't found them doesn't mean that there isn't anybody out there.
Good point. What's your follow-up, Jeffrey?
Yeah, my follow-up was Seth made a bet with people saying that we would find evidence of aliens by the year 2030, made this several years ago, and that if we didn't find them, that he would buy everybody a cup of coffee. And I was just wondering if you're more confident in that prediction, less confident in that prediction, or the same amount of confidence in that prediction?
Jeff, I hope you won't, remind people of this. Otherwise, I'm going to be having to buy an awful lot of coffee if we don't find somebody.
$3 million at Starbucks on a Friday. We'll all meet there.
You buy your Starbucks stock now, I would say. Yeah, well, that wasn't just a sort of an idle speculation. It was based on the fact that by 2030, I figured that SETI experiments would have checked out about 1 million star systems, roughly 1 million. And it just seemed to me that if you check out 1 million star systems, you're most likely going to hear something, unless, there's something wrong in the basic assumptions here, namely that there's a lot of cosmic company. So, while I think that the bet was not totally nonsense, I'm kind of worried that I may have to buy all that coffee.
That's a lot of coffee, Seth. So you've been doing this for so many years. Don't retire. We love you. We think you're the best.
Don't retire. Okay, I'll keep that in mind, George.
You're not thinking about that, are you?
No, most days not. No.
I mean, you're having fun still, aren't you?
I am, and I figure as long as you're having fun, you don't retire unless they force you to retire.
Do you go to schools or anything like that?
I do. I give about roughly 60 talks a year, something like that.
Well, that's pretty extensive.
That's a lot of talks. Yeah, that's one a week or something like that. And many of them are at universities, those kinds of schools, but occasionally at high schools or college classrooms or whatever. So,
do you go to any events anymore?
Well, I do when I'm invited, and it looks like it's going to be fun. Yeah, I do go to events. I do.
Because I remember you were was it Alien Con?
Yeah, I was at Alien Con. At least it sounds familiar to me.
A couple of years ago.
Yeah, down in Los Angeles, perhaps.
You were on a panel with me, I think.
Yes.
We had fun with that.
Yes.
We did.
Yeah, panel discussions are always fun because, you don't have to be the only speaker, and you can also disagree with the guy sitting next to you.
Where do we get your books?
Well, my books can be found on Amazon. Just go into Amazon, look for books under my name.
Old Jeff Bezos did that in his garage. Can you believe that?
Yeah. Yes. Well, Jeff Bezos is rather an accomplished person with clever ideas.
He really is. I got to get him on the show.
You should.
That's a fact. I wonder if I asked him the question, did you expect Amazon to be as big as it is? I wonder what he would have said.
Yeah, I think that the original idea was, well, he looked at the Internet. This is my understanding of it. He looked at the Internet and he thought, okay, this obviously offers some sort of commercial opportunities here. Yeah. And so what can you sell that's sort of generic that everybody wants to buy that can be sold over the Internet? And he thought, books. So there you go.
And look what he's done. Well, stick with us, Seth. We're going to take a short break, come back and take final calls. Seth Shostak from the SETI Institute, and you're next with him on Coast to Coast AM. And then I'll tell you what's in store next hour. We'll be back in a moment with Seth Shostak and take final calls as we talk about SETI, Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence. Next hour, Adam Hall joins us to talk about miracles. I'm looking forward to that as well. And welcome back to Coast. Seth Shostak with us and your calls. Seth, did they ever figure out what that wow signal was from years ago?
No, actually, they didn't. Although the people that picked it up, which is Ohio State University, with an antenna, by the way, that's no longer there. But in any case, they claim that while they can't be sure, their assessment was that it was some sort of terrestrial interference.
Ah, that happens.
Yes.
That happens indeed. I'm saddened by Arecibo not being online anymore.
Yeah, no, Arecibo is definitely not online. It collapsed under its own weight, which was a surprise to me, and I'm sure to many others as well, because if you've ever been down to Arecibo and looked at the cables that held the whole thing together, they were the thickness of your arm, really.
Huge, weren't they?
They were huge, and there were a lot of them, and it wasn't supposed to fall, but it did.
Started in pieces, didn't it?
Well, what happened was that the cables gave way. The cables that held up what's called the receiving platform. It was just this, a multi-ton assembly of steel and electronics and so forth, where the receivers were located, in fact. And that one of those cables gave way, so the whole thing crashed down into the dish and pretty much tore it up. So it would have been very expensive to repair it all.
Wasn't that in one of the James Bond films?
It was, GoldenEye.
That's it.
Yeah, it was. And in fact, the locals had a great deal of amusement from the filming of GoldenEye, because I think it was Pierce Brosnan that was playing the part of 007. And at some point he had to chase a bad guy around the base of the antenna. And, so they had him chasing this guy. The cameras are rolling and so forth. And they said, no, we lost the shot. You got to do it again. So he did it again. And they did it a third time. And by the time they got to the fourth take, 007, Pierce Brosnan said, look, I'm out of breath. I can't do this anymore. And they said, but you're James Bond. Of course you can do it. And the locals were amused by that.
I love it. Let's go to the phones. Bill in Los Angeles. Take it away, Bill.
Hi, George and Seth.
Hey, Billy.
Seth, I'm a skeptical former newspaper journalist, Columbia J School, 86. And when people tell me stuff, I automatically disbelieve them. But I'm also an adherent to Sir Karl Popper's philosophy of science, which indicates that the best theory that most explains the data is the one you go with, regardless of your feelings. And I have to tell you that in 1952, the fastest known aircraft were the F-86 and F-94 fighter jets that were shooting down much slower Soviet MiGs in the Korean War going on at a rate of 15 to 1. And yet in 1952, Harry Barnes, radar operator at National Airport, along with military personnel, recorded speeds of 7,200 miles an hour of blue and white saucer-shaped objects that were surrounding the F-94 pilots trying to chase them. They were going 10 times the speed of our fastest jets that were shooting down, as I said, Soviet jets much slower at the same time in the Korean War. Fast forward to 2004, the Navy videos that you mentioned, these things were going 58,000 miles per hour, according to the Navy flyers and experienced radar operators who tracked them. And in 2004, the fastest aircraft was the U.S. Space Shuttle at 12,000 miles per hour. I would suggest humbly to you that unless you can explain that data by some reference to an earthly creation of somebody on Earth who could create craft like that, much less fly them, doing all these reverse maneuvers and things that would destroy every kind of craft that we know as conventional, you would have to say that those things are not from this planet.
Well, Bill, I hesitate to to disagree with somebody from the Columbia School of Journalism, but keep in mind that when you quote these speeds that these craft have supposedly been traveling at, in order to know the speed, you need to know the distance. And that's what's usually, an assumption that's made, whether it's, trying to gauge the speed of TikTok craft seen in videos or any other thing. People make an assumption about how far away they are. And if that assumption is wrong, which it's clearly going to be wrong in some cases, then the speed that you compute is also wrong.
Next up, we've got Glenn in Nebraska. Take it away. Hi, Glenn. Good to have you with us.
George, thanks, Seth, for taking my call.
Sure.
I'm a ham operator here in Nebraska, and sometimes I try to bounce signals off of the International Space Station. And when I'm doing that, I have to move my frequencies in through 5 different frequencies to compensate for the Doppler shift of the shuttle moving towards me, and then when it's overhead, and then when it's moving away. And so what I'm wondering is what SETI does to make up for the Doppler shift with regard to the spin of planets and the rotation of planets around solar systems and solar systems around the galaxy. It's got to affect their signals as they come to the Earth, and I just wondered how SETI compensates for that.
Yeah, well, it's a good question, Glenn. I would say fine business on a great question. But it's what we do is really sort of simple. In fact, we look over a wide range of frequencies. We don't make any assumptions about their motion to or away from us. So we don't know what the Doppler shift might be. I mean, obviously, we know the Doppler shift that's introduced by some local phenomena like the rotation of the Earth or the speed of the Earth in orbit around the sun. Those we can take out. But, in fact, we don't know the speed at which their transmitter is moving toward or away from us. So we look over, as I say, a very wide range of frequencies, so we scoop them up no matter what the motions might be.
All right, let's go to Norm in St. Louis. Hey, Norm, thanks for holding. Welcome to the show.
Yeah, I got a couple of quick questions. First off, in your years of study and maybe all these emails you might have got about, say, alien abductions and whatnot, generally speaking, I guess, would you conclude that, generally speaking, the aliens are nicer, stronger, more intelligent, that sort of thing? And then second question is, I crunch numbers. I go on the internet and look at stats, and, I live in St. Louis, and I see homeless people everywhere. And I think, 26,000 people die of starvation every day in this world. And that's just pathetic. But we just spent $10 billion on a satellite to look for life on other planets. We got enough problems on this planet. And I'm not cutting down NASA and you type of people, but it's just like there's got to be more of a balance to me. You know what I'm saying?
Well, I hear what you're saying there, Norm, but on the other hand, you could make that argument at any time in human history. You could say to Chris Columbus, look at the amount of money you're spending on building these 3 caravels, these 3 ships. They're going to sail west out of Europe to who knows where. and it's not worth it. Or you could have said to Beethoven, look, we got to stop paying you because we got people who are dying of starvation in the streets. You can always say that there are more needy or more socially relevant projects to spend your money on. But if you do that, then you don't do things like exploration or trying to understand something, basic research. And in the long run, that's far more costly than spending the money.
Far more, indeed. Next up, let's go to Charles in Sebastopol, California, on the wild card line. Hey, Charles.
Hey there. Thanks for having me on. And hi, Seth. I've actually met you a couple of times in Berkeley a long time ago. But I've got a couple of thoughts, if I may, for Seth. First of all, when you're tracking something on radar, you do know how far it is. In fact, you tell rather precisely. NORAD does it all the time. So the reason I make that point is because in the so-called TikTok events, and I know you don't like that, and you sort of dismiss it, but let me just point this out. Several pilots over several different days spotted these things. They were also tracked on multiple different radar sites. They were tracked from almost at the edge of the atmosphere, going down to sea level, going into the sea in one case, and then popping back out. Multiple groups of people with their instruments saw this. And so I'm just kind of wondering why you're so dismissive and just say, well, it's an optical illusion or, you can't tell how fast it's going because of the distance. But I argue that because, like I said, the radar can tell you exactly what the distance is and what the location is. Well, and several different pilots see it from different angles. That gives you an even better handle on what you're seeing and its size and how fast it's going. So I'm just kind of wondering how you got to that conclusion.
Well, I think it's largely because the radars of which I am aware were from ships on the surface, whereas, the videos are made from aircraft in the skies at 22,000 feet. So they're not looking along the same lines of sight. So I think that there's real ambiguity in the distance of these things from the cameras on the F-18 Super Hornets. I think that's really my point.
First-time caller Tim in Rochester, New York. Hi, Tim. Welcome to the program.
Hi, how you doing tonight?
Okay. Hope you are too.
Good. You're doing a great job, Mr. Norrie. I'm sort of a off-topic question here, but I really am having a hard time believing in the Big Bang, that something came from nothing with this universe. And I was wondering if your guests had any other ideas of how our universe was created.
And I share your same thoughts, Tim.
Well, Tim, I can understand the idea of a Big Bang. I mean, that didn't appeal to all the astrophysicists at the time that it became sort of put out there. They didn't like it either. In fact, Big Bang was a kind of a derisive comment made by Fred Hoyle. He was a well-known British theoretician, physicist really, who, was trying to make fun of the whole idea of the way that the universe started with some sort of explosion. He said, so you mean to tell me that the universe began with some sort of big bang, right? I mean, little did he realize that his derisive term for what we now call the Big Bang actually became the name for the Big Bang. But keep in mind that you can have something from nothing. It's weird, but if you just take the vacuum of space, just take a bit of space, a cubic meter of space, and there's nothing in it, no gas, nothing. And in fact, you get the presence of mass is in there. I mean, there are things in it. It isn't ever completely empty. So you can have Big Bangs even in the presence of a vacuum. So that's all modern physics, and I don't pretend to explain it here, but it's just something that can happen, and it doesn't take any energy. You get the whole universe for free, right? But it just sort of explodes into view, and it's worth looking up. What was the Big Bang and what was banging, and that kind of stuff.
I still don't get it myself, Seth.
Yeah,
I don't get it.
It's non-intuitive, put it that way.
Mary in Los Angeles. Hi, Mary. Go ahead.
Hi. I have a text friend named Diana who said that she was a pro bono psychic, and turns out she's an alien. And she gives me messages. I argue with her. She's not nice. And because I can't seem to write a book immediately, she's putting me in some kind of a intergalactic course. And I think I'm actually getting messages. And I have it on my phone. I have actual like she talks to me in dot matrix 1000110000, and then I get like one time she sent a voicemail, and it was in a different language, and I swear I don't even believe in aliens, and I can't figure out how she does it. She knows my thoughts. She's like immediately on what's going on, and she'll send me a text while it's happening. What do you say to that?
She try to hurt you?
No, well, mentally anguish me. Like there's a person, she says it's her clone, who lives on my floor where I live. And if I have an argument, all I do is hear her complaining that I'm not nice to her clone.
Seth, are there aliens among us?
Well, some people think so. I guess in this case they do, but I can't say that there's much evidence that convinces scientists that there are aliens amongst us. I mean, there are plenty of people amongst us who are a little different, but they're not aliens as far as we can tell. They still, they have blood and nervous systems and everything else that, tags them as being humans.
Do you remember when you had that great debate with the late Stanton Friedman on the show?
I do.
I miss that guy.
Yeah.
He's a good guy. You're all good people, Seth. So what's next for you? What's your next program?
Well, we didn't talk about it much, but SETI is, broadening its horizons a little bit. We're, as I said, going to be applying artificial intelligence to the search, but also we'll be using the Very Large Array down in New Mexico. I mentioned that too.
Yep.
In a kind of a piggyback mode. So it'll be doing conventional astronomy, if you will, but at the same time we'll be able to use it to do SETI work, and that will result in an enormous increase in the amount of sky and the amount of the radio spectrum that we cover. So, if there's a signal to be found, that's a good bet to find it.
And you come back on the show and tell us that, okay?
I will do it.
Thank you. Seth Shostak up next. Miracles with Adam Hall. Do you believe in miracles? I sure do. They happen all the time. In a moment, Adam Hall back with us. We're going to talk about his work with miracles. A couple of his books include The Little Book of Genius and Miracles, 13 Wisdom Teachings to Create Inner Peace. We'll take your calls next hour with him on Coast to Coast AM. And welcome back to Coast. George Norrie with you. Adam Hall is a trained shaman and teacher of A Course in Miracles. He's the creator of the Genius Process, founder and CEO at the Genius Studio. Adam has 4 decades of experience as an impact investor and entrepreneur. He is a published author and has been a featured presenter at various summits. And here he is back on Coast to Coast, Adam Hall. Adam, welcome back.
Oh, it's great to hear your voice, George, and great to be back with everybody. I'm looking forward to our conversation tonight.
How was our friend that has to do with miracles? You bring us such powerful information every time you're on.
Well, thank you. I'm smiling. I enjoyed the lead-in music. Do you believe in miracles? So would I. And I look forward to exploring that, especially with a world that's seemingly so challenged and inviting us, and maybe some of us are calling miracles, and we get to explore a little bit of that tonight and enliven that, and hopefully more of our lives.
Is a miracle necessarily all religious?
Actually, not at all. I mean, oftentimes we have perceptions of miracles, as you know, George, as something miraculous happens. And it does. There are those kind of events where somebody is cured of a deadly illness, and which is often engaged with faith and connection, and sometimes we relate that to a religious experience. But what I have found that the vast majority of miracles have nothing to do with religion. They have to do with our own inner presence, our own beliefs, and our own faith in something that is serving the greater good of us all. And that's not necessarily religious.
Right.
It may be spiritual to some, but actually it's just belief and faith in what could possibly happen.
What creates the miracle, Adam? Are we tapping into some kind of source? Are we doing it to ourselves? Where's it coming from?
Well, that's a great question, George. And what I've kind of experienced over the years of my own particular journey into what is a miracle, how does that impact my life, or how has it come into my life? What I've discovered is that miracles are a shift in perception. And it can be as simple as shifting away from an someone to just shifting into a place of saying, okay, I don't want to be tethered to that story. I want to shift into a new story, into a new way of living my life. And that actually is a miracle because we leave behind what is no longer serving us. So miracles move us from those old stories by shifting our perception into what's serving the greater good of ourselves. And, of course, ultimately, George, the planet.
That's true. Does prayer play a part in miracles, Adam?
Well, absolutely. I think a couple things that are that I have found is kind of a best practice, be it prayer, but even more than prayer is what I have found is coming in just a real presence of heart, of mind, of soul, just being connected to that place within you that is so aligned with love and kindness and compassion that it cultivates that energy, it cultivates that field. Therefore, we can experience the everyday miracle.
What would you say a miracle is? Give us a few examples.
Well, I'll share with you an example that comes very close to home for me.
All right.
And that's related to my three daughters. And I now have 7 granddaughters, believe it or not.
Oh, good for you.
I think I mentioned that.
And they're all precious, aren't they?
They're all precious as can be. But there was a time in my life after I got divorced where they were gone from my life. And I won't get into all of the drama and the story of it, but it was a tremendous life loss for me because they are the most precious things in the world to me. They are the most important things to me. And I had no way to know where that would go or where it would lead other than that they were left my life for reasons I won't get into, but ultimately the prayer supported me. The journey to love within myself was very supportive to me. And when I began to shift away from the fear of my loss into the belief and faith in love and the love that I shared with my daughters, that they came back into my life in a beautiful new way. So there is the most important miracle that I experienced in shifting from that fear to that love, from that loss to that which I will always hold most deeply in my heart. And those 3 precious girls that's where I know they are.
Super. You know, there are a number of stories, too, where people have had reports of tumors disappearing with prayer and stuff like that. To me, that's a miracle.
Well, absolutely. We hear of those stories, and I think those are miracles. And I believe, from what little I do know about that, about curing cancer. I'm not a medical doctor or anything of this nature, but what I've known through my own healing and helping healing with others and seeing major healings happen within people that I work with in my own life is that when they come back into that place of prayer, when they come into that place of their own divine ground, as we would say, when they come into that place in the presence of light, of love, of God, if you will, if that's how you would refer to that, is that miracle can really happen and really occur. We're seeing it all the time. And some of us don't need that kind of miracles. Many of us do. So we hold them in the place where they can experience these kind of miracles. I'm so happy to hear your belief in those miracles.
Oh, my
George.
God, absolutely. Absolutely. Now, for a miracle to occur to an individual, Adam, must they believe in miracles?
Well, that's an interesting question because I believe belief is one of the key things. But I want to qualify what I just said a little bit. I'm going to drill down and hack that for a minute because there's belief in the separate part of ourselves, separate from our whole self, our God self, our higher self, as some would say. And we can believe in things, and yet that in that place of belief, of separation, kind of ego and personal interest, kind of narcissistic belief system, that kind of belief does not support manifesting the kind of miracles that I'm speaking of. It may manifest a lot of other things, but the kind of miracles that we speak to in our new book that I just put out with Deborah Engel and Alan Cohen is we speak to an alignment of body, mind, spirit, soul into the presence of shifting away from that separate mindset, shifting into that place of the miracle mind, which is the greatest intelligence of all. So belief, yes, but qualified because no, not in the separate idea of self and self-serving, but really in serving the greater good of course yourself, but others as well.
In your book, Miracles, you talk about 13 wisdom teachings. Is there any particular one that is more important than the other for helping to create a miracle?
Well, there is. In the one that I would refer to here, George, with that your question is something we refer to in the book is true purpose, not just purpose, true purpose. And Robert Brine said the purpose of life is a life of purpose. True purpose is living a life of purpose, which in essence of what we share in Miracles, the purpose-driven life is the authentic life, the life that's aligned with the heart, that aligns heart and mind. So true purpose, that which leads always to your greatest good, the truest, most integral self, is the invitation to miracles. Very supportive. If you practice anything, that place within you that is most authentic is the miracle worker.
If you had 20 people praying for a miracle, and then you had in another room just one person praying, would the 20 make it happen more so than the one? I don't think they would. I don't think that matters.
No, it does not matter. I think it's kind of quantum mechanics. Actually, we're all aligned in that wave. Whether you're 1 or you're 100 or you're 1,000, we're all connected in that field of miracles. So the power of an individual is great as the power of a greater force when it comes to aligning with spirit and delivering miracles into our lives. It's not to say coming together in miracles is not a good or bad thing, because it's great to come together in prayer and in meditation and miracles. But ultimately, I would say to anybody, you can deliver the miracle standing tall, standing firm in your prayer and in your belief of life and love and the healing of yourself and perhaps somebody you love right now that's calling for that miracle.
Can you rattle through some of these other 13 wisdom teachings, one, of course, being true purpose, as you just mentioned?
Well, absolutely. I mean, we have forgiveness, which we've always spoken so much about, and forgiving of self and forgiving of others, not for what happened, because we can't deny that. But what we can do is we can free ourselves from the prison of hanging on to the judgment of what happened. There's another beautiful one of course, is the inner peace, because the subtitle for our book is coming to that place of inner peace. Because in that true purpose, in that authentic self, George, we find that place of inner peace. That's the source of miracles. It comes from the peace within that emanates that light. There's other great teachings as well along the lines of destiny. What is your highest function on the planet? How can we live a life of divine doing and divine being, not simply living in a narcissistic world of doing for ourselves? I know that one well, lived much of my life that way. And ultimately looking at evolution, looking at oneness, and looking at involution, how spirit, how the presence of the greater light and love flows through us all. They're all rich, and they're all have so much to offer. in this journey of ours, and I encourage everybody to check it out.
How many times, Adam, have we heard people say, I really need a miracle on this one? Happens all the time, doesn't it?
Yeah. It does. And, now more than ever, George, I think, and I'm sure you're experiencing it. Many of those that are here with us tonight are experiencing that very question. And, the world is seemingly in chaos. There's conflict and tension in the skies, on the ground, in the water, in our communities, in our families, and there's so much going on. We are really wanting and asking to align ourselves with seemingly a miracle. But I invite those that are feeling that way, I invite them tonight to really think about simply shifting our perception of it. And, of course, A Miracle speaks to this because it says, seek not to change the world, seek to change your mind about the world. How do we come to experience the world? Doesn't mean it's all not there, but it's how we experience and how we perceive it. So that's the miracle that I believe is supporting and guiding us through these great challenging times, not just our health crises that each of us face or our loved ones face, but the health crises of humanity that's happening. And that will help guide us through to, let's just say, new days, new earth, as many have spoken to.
Are miracles always present?
Always.
Do they always happen to good people?
They happen to anybody that asks, that aligns with in the truest part of their heart and authenticity of what their intention is, and they always happen. It may take a little bit of time, but they always happen. Once that seed is planted, once it's nurtured, like in your garden, once it's nurtured, give a little water, pay attention to it, it will happen. I'm living that in my life. So I say that very clearly.
Do they make believers out of doubters when they do happen?
Well, there's always skeptics and cynics and non-believers.
And you may get some of those calls tonight, by the way.
Well, I welcome all calls because everybody needs to be heard, and I think this is important to really hear from people that are believers and doubters, and it's not a function of conversion. It's a function of supporting people into their own expansion and their own thought process. And I believe that we all live a journey of believing and discovering and disbelieving, and then believing and discovering and disbelieving. So it's a healthy process, an evolutionary process, to not always have to believe in everything, if you know what I mean. It's kind of fun to be curious and to be questioned and to doubt sometimes, because ultimately it can support your own personal journey into miracles and maybe new and better things for you that you may be looking for or dreaming about or fulfilling in your heart's truest desire.
What is a good definition, Adam, of a miracle? How would you categorize it?
That's a great question, George, and I'd categorize it simply as an alignment of body, mind, spirit, and soul, where we are able to shift our mind away from seeing things as separate to seeing and experience things as whole in the oneness of who we truly are.
How about also something like, that which should not happen happens?
Well, I like that, and in some respects, because it's seemingly defying, logic, defying science, even defying any rational.
It goes against the grain of everything, doesn't it?
It goes against the grain of and everything. So it's simply it's almost like you flip it over. So you like the paradox of it. You just flipped it over. It goes against everything. And oh my goodness, there it is. There is almost an awakening of like, well, how could that occur? That does happen. And what I'm offering here and what I'm sharing and what we share in the miracles is there's more to it than just that. There's more to it that invites everyday miracles. It invites them into your life. It invites them to be part of your own personal growth, your own personal journey, to whether it's at your work or people you know or in your relationship or just in being alive now with all its challenges. It invites us there as well, not just the seemingly big events or the things that are like unfathomable type of things.
We're going to take a quick break with Adam Hall and come back in just a moment and talk more about miracles. We're going to take calls with him next hour. In addition to your questions, share a miracle story with us. I'm sure one has happened to you in your life, and we'd love to hear that too. Back in a moment on Coast to Coast AM. We'll take your calls next hour with Adam Hall on miracles and share your miracle stories with us as well. And welcome back to Coast. George Norrie back with Adam Hall. Adam, you had mentioned earlier inner peace, but explain that a little bit more and why that's so important.
Well, we often think of peace in the world, and there's been so much around the peace movement over the last, several decades, George. And the peace we often want to come from our environmental condition, our ecology, where we live, where we're hanging out, what's the world about. And yes, of course, but the outside picture is really a reflection of the inward condition. So if we are not in a state of inner peace, then there's nothing we can do in the outer to create outer peace. So the invitation here, George, and everyone is in the miracles to shift away from the perception of the outer chaos and conflict, say, in this context of peace, and to shift back into the own presence of really what I have found is a very natural state, which is an inner state of peace, which is just simply what I find and practice the best I can, and that is an equilibrium, a real balance of body, mind, health, and spirit, and wellness. So just balancing those things, I find, bring us the deepest form of peace. Meditation is, of course, a practice. It helps. Prayer is a practice. It helps. Connecting in nature is a practice. It helps. But ultimately, that place of just simple breath and silence is the place in the sanctuary that I have found, and I think everyone will find it themselves if they're looking for inner peace, to find it in that inner place of their own presence and silence.
Adam, in your book Miracles, you talk a little bit about A Course in Miracles. What is that? Yeah.
Well, A Course in Miracles is an extraordinary piece of work that was a transduction, a kind of a transduction by Helen, who translated this back in the late 60s and early 70s, and she was a Jewish woman who taught psychology at the New York University, and she had no relationship with Christianity or Jesus or anything, but suddenly she began to channel Jesus in those words, of his words. And essentially, George, to just the kind of simplest way to understand the Course is it says that nothing real can be threatened. Nothing unreal exists. Herein lies the peace of God.
It works, doesn't it?
Yes, it does.
Are there any obstacles towards getting a miracle?
There are, and I've identified 5 of them. And the first one is ourselves. We simply get in the way of ourselves. It's that classic self-sabotage.
We block ourselves, don't we?
We block ourselves. So we deny that we're unworthy. We're lousy bums. We don't deserve this place of these gifts, and we don't deserve these powers. Also, interestingly, is the separate mindset of the ego, which does not manifest in the line with miracles, it does not want miracles. So unconsciously, we actually don't want them because the miracles bring in the love, bring in the healing, bring in the compassion. And that means that separate self no longer really exists. That identity that we used to have has to go away. So paradoxically, we don't want the miracles. So we can get into a whole conversation around those obstacles. But ultimately, those are the two top key obstacles. And the best way is to begin to really question anything and any thought that is denying those presence of those greater truths of ourselves as love, as compassion, as powerful healers of our lives and others, as miracle workers. I mean, what is your miracle bank? You have a bank of miracles. Let's put them to good use for yourself, for your family, and for the world.
Tell us about the Little Book of Genius.
Well, George, it's, a couple of years ago, I published a book called Divine Genius, The Unlearning Curve.
Right.
And I don't subscribe to necessarily that we need to learn all these things. I more subscribe these days, maybe it's because I'm a little older now, that we just need to unlearn some of the things that don't really work for us anymore. And that is really the mindset of the unmiracle worker, and that's the ego and the separate self that just divides and separates the problem from the solution. So as an outgrowth of the divine genius, the unlearning curve, came forth a series of teachings, wisdom teachings, 13 wisdom teachings. And what we decided to do, my partner Deb Engel and myself, is to do a series of little books related to topics like miracles. Miracles is our second book. Our first one was on abundance. We have a couple more very exciting little books coming this year. And the whole idea is, let's keep it simple. We don't need to overthink it. We don't need to complicate it. So we created a simple little book of genius. It's 72 pages. It's succinct. It's to the point, and will get you exactly the kind of answer that you're looking for. So that's the idea of the divine genius, the little book of genius series, I should say.
Are you still practicing shamanism?
I am. That's an integral part of my life. It's who I am. It's what I do, and I've been on an incredible exploration about what is shamanism. And, many people kind of scratch their head. Is that some kind of feather thing, or is that kind of, witchcraft thing? And it's neither of those things, because ultimately the shaman, George, a man or a woman, is simply an intermediary between the seen and the unseen world, between spirit and the physical world. Jesus was a prime example of a shaman, simply holding the space of that which can help heal us, expand us, and allow us to live in the oneness of our love, connected to the Pachamama. The shaman and the indigenous people are very connected to the mother, and that principle that is the life-giving force. So the shamanism is very much a part of my life and my being and my exploration and a lot of my work, amongst other things. So thanks for checking in with me on that, George.
And Adam, you have courses that you have available, don't you?
Yeah, I'm rolling out. I've rolled out a couple master classes. One on discovering your genius, which really takes you through those obstacles that we spoke about, kind of gets you into, kind of hacks that separate self and really discovers the authentic self, that true purpose that I was speaking. That's free. You can get that on my website. And then I have another course that I also had put out, really about is evolving our old story if you think about it, George, we're living in this old story of how we lived our lives or how the world's supposed to work, or, my teacher told me it's this way, my parent, evolving these old stories into what is your new story? Because when we tell that new story, when we let go of the old story, the miracle happens because we shift away and we move forward, seemingly with unsurmountable challenges at times. But that's the other master course that I share. So those are the kind of two best offerings that are no cost that people can enjoy. And they can find those on my website.
What about people who have a serious illness, Adam? What do you recommend here, in addition to doing practical medicine, of course?
Well, absolutely. Practical medicine has a very powerful and important purpose. So let's just say that at the top. And I want to say to anybody listening here, if you are experiencing a serious illness, I want you to know that my prayers and my thoughts are with you tonight and in this moment, because it's not to be underestimated what that ultimately means. And I've worked with people that have and are undergoing serious types of illnesses, and the fear in and of itself could be deadly and very damaging in its own right. So here's what I often do: really begin that shift in perception into the light, connecting with the life force in nature, connecting to the magic in the eyes of a child, connecting to places that are living embodiments of love, and to move into a place of that presence. Often we want to fight and we want to battle. And I'm not advocating what you do. I'm only advocating come into the presence of light, come into the presence of love, come into the presence of that prayer that will bring into you the life force, the all-giving force that will heal your life and move your energy into a new vibratory field. So that's what I offer. Come into that new presence. Come into that vibrancy. Come into that frequency. Come into that prayer. And I often find that just in my own life, in the connection with nature, connection with children, and in other places that bring life alive, at least for me.
Adam, what do you say to that person that kind of has a cloud over their heads, that nothing seems to work right for them?
Well, they
need more than miracles, I guess.
Yeah, I take a little bit of different approach with that. To me, that is a situation that says, get out of your own way. Why are you making an excuse for your greatness? Why are you making an excuse not to be in your light? Why are you making an excuse not to live your life to the fullest it can be? So I take a little different approach, which is a little more of a prod and a little more of a poke, because I believe each and every human being has been given the gift of miracles, has been given the gift of light and genius. They need do nothing to have that. That is given. And that is what
Is it God-given?
Well, I personally believe that God gave me that has been given. And I often pose to many people today, George, the presence that what if you knew right now that you've been given everything, that God has given it to you, your higher being has given it to you, whatever it is, whatever you think is there for you, it's been given to you. This is what you get to work with. Discover the miracle in that, the power in that, those God-given rights, those lights, those rights that are here in presence within you. I believe every single human being has that available to them right now. And for goodness sakes, some of us just need to get out of our own darn way and get on with living the light and living the love and living the genius of they are, and put their miracles to work. Put them to work. Why not?
Is it easy to overcome obstacles?
Yes, and I can see how people have such tremendous challenge. And I know through my own personal journey over the last 20 years of very concentrated study, learning, growing, crying, and all those things in between, that seems insurmountable at times. But with prayer and connection with the light and the energy of, say, nature or children or things, as I mentioned, those obstacles are overcome. Interestingly, in A Course in Miracles, it clearly says it's simple to overcome them. It's only the human condition that wants to make it complicated. I mean, how much have we overthought something? We want to be linear. We want to scrutinize something. We beat it to death to make it complicated, with ultimately to come back into the heart, come back into the presence of love and acceptance of self-love. It's all obstacles can be overcome instantly under that condition.
We're going to come back in just a moment with Adam Hall and take phone calls, questions about miracles, or share your own miracle story with us, if you would. His website is earthkeeperalliance.com, linked up at coasttocoastam.com, and his books, of course, are still available, including Miracles, Divine Genius, The Earth Keeper, and the Little Book of Genius Miracles, the Little Book of Genius Abundance, and much more. So don't touch your dial. We'll be right back. The phone lines are now open for you on Coast to Coast AM. And this hour, we'll take your calls with Adam Hall as we talk about miracles, share your stories, ask a question when we come back. Welcome back. Adam Hall with us. George Norrie back with you. Adam, what do you personally think about miracles in your own feeling?
That they've made all the difference in my life, and my life would be much more turbulent, unpeaceful, less joyful. There would be a seeking process of love. I wouldn't know where to find the health. It may be a fine life, but it wouldn't be the ultimate one that I've been asking for and the one I live now, without miracles, without shifting my perception into a new reality that aligns me with life, love, God, faith, and the place to move forward together in inner peace.
Have you had more than one miracle occur for you?
Many.
They don't stop, do they?
They don't stop. They don't stop. Once I opened to that, which occurred for me, George, back in 2005, really through a personal life crisis. I mean, many of us aren't necessarily in need of a miracle around our health, but many, many of us now more than ever are asking for miracles around our mental health. And we all know mental health is a primary concern right now.
That's huge.
For many of us. Yeah.
It is huge. With everything that's happening on the planet today, Adam, how difficult is it to seek out miracles?
It's easy, really, when you know how to do that. And it's a simple process that I offer to people, which is getting into a place where you can be still with your breath, where you can come into breath simply to breathe. I'm not saying you got to meditate or any of these other things, but just sit on the ground and breathe, because in that presence becomes that place within you that is alive, that place within you that is asking to be given voice, that place within you that is love, that place that calls you into the presence of your own light. And that aligns you with this field that is the miracle field. And quantum physics and other things are now bearing this out. We won't get over into that necessarily, but ultimately that's the process. Get into that position, get into that place within you, and ask for that presence to be with you and to guide guide you. It will, in due course. It will.
All right, let's go to the phones. First-time caller Shad is with us in Kansas. Welcome to the show. Hi, Shad.
Well, hi, George. What a pleasure to get to speak with you and with your guest. I'm a relatively new listener, just been listening for a few years. But
welcome.
I just love your program.
Good to have you on the team.
Thank you. And like part of the family.
That's right.
And speaking of which, I was a relatively new believer 35 years ago, approximately, and a new believer in Jesus, and that was a miracle in and of itself. Going through that wonderful experience, and turned out I had a double birthday at the age of 24. But a few years later, God was, I guess, showing me, that I did matter to Him, that He did have a plan for my life, and I was like my third day on the job, an early morning job at a nursing facility, and I had to drive 20 miles to get there, so I was my third morning on the job. I was running kind of late because it was an hour that I wasn't accustomed to, around 6 in the morning. And so I was nervous about going because I knew I was going to try to go at excessive speed to get there on time. And so I even checked the streets on my way, and they were sweating. It was a little on the cooler side, and I was coming around a large S curve about halfway there. I was going along just fine. Had a big old Buick LeSabre in 1974 in immaculate condition. And all of a sudden, the front, the front wheels suddenly just towed in hard left. Apparently, I found out later I'd hit a slick spot. That the road was on the verge of freezing, and I wasn't aware of that.
Yeah.
Anyway, it jackknifed me like a slingshot, of the Bible, swung me around in I believe my rear end hit the ditch instantly, and it was shaped like a wedge, and I started hurtling down that ditch all the way for quite a while. But as soon as I began to spin, sort of like in a dryer, it was as though there was a masculine authoritative voice entered into my head like stereo at the beginning of the accident and said, "Relax your arms and legs." And apparently I was obedient. I could kind of hear myself yelling in the background, but I ended up coming to rest quite a while later on the roof of my car, which was completely destroyed. Absolutely everything was completely obliterated on the car. But I was able to undo my seatbelt and couldn't go out my driver's side because it was too crunched in. Went out the passenger side. Of course, I grew up a child of the 70s, and so I watched all those shows where as soon as you get out of your car, the car blows up. So I was hearing.
That's right. Run.
So I literally got out of the car and ran, and as it turned out, I had an oncoming. It was dark, but I'd had an oncoming older pickup, antique pickup, with a driver had just parked past me. He'd gone past me, and his voice was quaking. He goes, "Are you all right?" And I go, "Yes." And I was running toward him. I said, I just want to get away from that car. And anyway, I just know that God intervened in that, and it helped me to realize that He did have a plan for my life.
Miracles do happen, Shad, don't they?
And I'm so blessed. A few years later, I went through an experience where I was singing outside. I don't know if you heard the song, "I love you, Lord, and I lift my voice to worship you, oh, my soul rejoice. Take joy, my King, in what you hear. May it be a sweet, sweet sound in your ear. I love, I said like that. I was outdoors, and I grew up in Northwest Kansas, and I was home visiting my folks out in the country, 10 miles out, and you've got nothing but brilliant starscapes out there in the Great Plains. And I was just all of a sudden I noticed as I was singing, a little star kind of get tugged down, sort of like a slingshot, and it went doing, and it went from northeast. It was released, and it went from northeast, or rather southeast, all the way to the northwest, arc clear across the sky. And I just began to, weep and laugh at the same time. Go, I can't believe it.
It was a sign from above. Adam, let me ask you this: once you have one miracle, you can have many, can't you?
Yes, George, and thank you for sharing that, Chad. And I just so pleased that you're here and sharing that powerful story, because that relationship that you have with Spirit, you have with God, is like an affinity. It's like a light that just invites others to come to that, and that invites more miracles. So it's wonderfully inspiring to hear this, that you're cultivating miracles, and they'll be present in your life, and as you need them, as you're called to be guided to do the great work that you're doing. So thank you for sharing that.
Let's go to John in Wisconsin. Take it away, John.
Hello, George. Hello, Adam. Before I share my miracle, I would like to share a quick definition of faith.
Sure.
I learned this definition from one of George's previous guests on Coast to Coast, and it goes like this: faith is believing in something you cannot explain. Now, I cannot explain how my miracle happened. I can only reassure you it was a miracle. 3.5 years ago, when I was 62, I went blind. To this day, after many fabulous doctors, I've been told I am in absolutely excellent health. There's nothing wrong with me. Prior to going blind, my life was a series of highs and lows. I was very, very happy, and then I would make a decision that would ultimately crash it down. Time and time again, I made poor decisions, and my life was a bunch of train wrecks. So the miracle is this. After I went blind, and shortly before that, my wife had a stroke. We have no children, no grandchildren, and we rent a house on a big farm in north central Wisconsin. This blindness brought me something that Adam touched on, and Adam touched on many good points. And my point is the inner peace it brought me. I just felt tons and tons of weight lifted off me, because now I could use all of the lessons I've learned from my bad decisions to help others. And on this farm we live on, a number of families live here. I'm kind of like the adopted uncle. I share my stories with them. I bring them hope and just tell them there's better days ahead. So my miracle is, if I had not gone blind, I would still be making poor decisions, get highs of happiness, and crash it down again. And Adam, I just wanted to thank you, because you have touched on so many good points today that I know will help so many other people. My wife does all my administrative work. She did have a stroke, but she does my administrative work. And when she gets up in the morning, I'm going to have her research your books and look forward to getting some. So thank you so much.
Great, John. And I'm going to meet you in the Pat Boone event, right?
I am so excited, George. Yes, of course, my wife can't travel. I have a traveling companion. She's a professional musician from northern Wisconsin. We'll travel like brother and sister, and we are so looking forward to it. And I think Tommy was going to make sure, got kind of seats maybe closer to the buffet, because I can't do anything. But I'm just so thankful to be able to come to that, George.
When you went blind, let me ask you this for a second. Did you wake up in the morning and you couldn't see anymore?
Great question. So my job prior to going blind, I was a food service salesman. I would have my laptop, my car, and I traveled from restaurant to restaurant in north central Wisconsin. And one day I was driving back home, and my one eye was itching. It just itched. It felt something wasn't right. So for whatever reason, I put my hand over my other eye, and I couldn't see out of the eye that itched. I could not see. There was nothing there. And so when I got back home, made an appointment with the eye doctor, got in right away. And she did her evaluations and everything, wonderful doctor, wonderful clinic. And she says, John, the the good news is your other eye works, and there's a 80% chance you won't lose that. So, carry on and all that. So I did carry on. Well, George, 3 weeks later, we were driving home from my parents' house in suburban Milwaukee. I live in north central Wisconsin. It's a 2.5-hour drive north. My wife can't drive. And I was telling my wife, I'm struggling getting the car home. It's not going as well as it did on the way down to Milwaukee. We got home, and the next morning, I said, I better go check with the doctor again. So I got in right away on a kind of an emergency basis. She says, you've got to get down to our hospital right away. You're losing your other eye, and I don't know why. So they pumped me for steroids. And, George, thank God I had good insurance. I had every expert in Wisconsin look at me over the next 4 days. They all came to the same conclusion. You're in excellent health. You're going blind, and we don't know why.
And they still don't. They still don't know why.
They still do not, George. And I was at the.
Did you use eye drops at all, John?
I didn't prior, no, and I didn't need glasses until I was 52 years old.
Okay.
I think what it was, George, and this is just me, and maybe Adam could add something to this. I think it was just all my bad decisions that I made in my previous 35 years caused stress on my optical nerve, and my optical nerve just said I had enough, and you're going to move on and help out other people by being blind.
Would stress have done that, Adam?
Well, I think stress can do a lot of things, and obviously I'm not a medical doctor, but I do want to share this with John. Thank you, John, for sharing that. I'm inspired to hear what you're sharing and to hear this story. And perhaps perhaps God's plan was to provide you with this, say, opportunity through this seeming tragedy of loss of sight to really inspire others, because I'm hearing you, and even in the process of listening and tuning to what you're doing, hopefully you're sharing this story around because it's so helpful, and it shifts the planet, it shifts people's lives, and what greater work can we do than to help bring our miracles to other people that are asking for miracles and are in need of the light and love that we have and the experience. So thank you for offering that. And maybe that's what this is all about in its own way.
Let's go to Marcia in Los Gatos, California, west of the Rockies. Hey, Marsh, go ahead.
Hey, George. Nice to hear you tonight. And
thank you.
I want to remind you to have all the love you can. Grab it. It's wonderful. All these miracles are on like a conveyor belt in front of you. If you know you need it and you want it, that conveyor belt is going to God. Take what you need and what you want and thank God for it.
Thank you.
As a registered nurse, I left the state. I got my license after several years, and I came back home toward my parents, and I took a little job in a cannery in Sunnyvale, cannery number CCG and number 3. And I was responsible from 4 at night till 4 in the morning to take care of all the falls, the concussions, the cuts, the boils, anything that happened with the people working there. But I was told by the boss, don't call 911. If something happens, you take care of it. I don't want this. I don't want production to stop. I want you to just take care of it. So I was under a little bit of pressure. There was a hospital nearby, and I knew that if I couldn't handle it, I'd send it off anyway. But I always could sense something was wrong. You could feel it in the place, and I felt something had happened, and I was ready, and I was standing there when they entered into my into the first aid area, and it was a group of men, and they were carrying a man in, and he was just trembling, and I said, what happened? He got his arm caught in the conveyor belt. It's going to lose it.
Oh, geez.
And it was they were very frightened, and I didn't know what was happening, but I knew that God was with me, and I knew that I was with God, and so I looked at the damage that was done, and his arm was just all bent up, and with ecchymotic big blisters on it, but I tested his little fingers, to see if there was a break, and I decided I could handle this. Okay, everybody, he's going to be fine. Go back to work. So everybody went back to work, and I had a translator because most people were speaking Hispanic or Portuguese. and I had a translator, and I laid this man down in the room, actually sitting up in bed, and I grabbed this towel that I had, a wet towel put in the freezer. I always had a wet towel in the freezer, and it was like an ice pack, right? So he sat up in the bed, and I sat next to him, and I put this towel, pretty good size, towel, iced towel over his arm, and I had the translator say, "Pull up the shirt on the other arm, and I want to see the other arm." And so she did, and so I looked at the other arm, and I said, "Tell him I want this arm to look like this one. Look at this one. This one is perfect. I see this one." And I sat with the man, held him for about 40 minutes later. It was like the end of the shift. And the men came up. We took off the towel, and there was no injury.
See, you saved his life. You were the miracle. We're going to come back with Adam Hall and take final calls in a moment. On our next Coast to Coast program, a former banker who made $500 million for his investors and himself ended up going to jail. He's going to talk about his life and how he messed it up and what he's trying to do to come back. And then we'll be talking about the other side with our special guest, Catherine Nadell, on Coast to Coast AM. And welcome back. George Norrie along with Adam Hall and your final calls. Adam, before we take final calls, tell us a little more about the Earthkeeper Alliance.
Well, it's great to be here with all of you. And, yes, please come and visit us on our website to learn more about the Earthkeeper Alliance. And the journey to that, George, was quite simply that when I began to do the deeper shamanic work and all the trainings, that I was initiated as an Earthkeeper. And the Earthkeeper Alliance is dedicated to all of us who are keeping the Earth, who are tending to the well-being of the planet, not just environmentally, George, but to our humanity. So that's the mission of the Earthkeeper Alliance, and it's a collection of people around the globe, a loose collection of leaders and people that really care about the well-being of our Earth and the soul of our humanity, actually.
All right, final calls we go. Ruth in Maryland to get us started in this segment. Hello, Ruth. Go ahead.
Hi, George, and hi, Adam. I have a miracle story for you, but first I have a comment. I believe that God and the angels have a lot to do with the miracles, and I have an answer for your question, George, about seeking out miracles, and it's faith. You need faith, and faith is the substance of things not seen and the evidence of things hoped for. And my miracle story is God and Mother Mary literally saved me from a fire in my car one night. If you remember, I called in about, 8 months ago. You had a show on purgatory, and I told you that I like to go to the cemetery, decorate the cemetery.
Mm-hmm.
Well, anyway, I was decorating the cemetery that day, and I put little statues and angels and stuff and different things up at the. I like to do the old graves where nobody goes to anymore, and anyway, there was one particular statue. It was Mother Mary, and I couldn't leave it at the cemetery because it was a vase. So I had left it in my car. I had a coupe, and it was in the back on the back floor. And the same day, I had given somebody a ride, and they had a bicycle. So I had take everything out of my trunk and put their bicycle in my trunk, and I put it in my back seat and on the back floor. And it was a bunch of chemicals, automobile stuff, and then I had some bags of clothes. And anyway, on the way home, I was about maybe 5 or so miles from home. It was very dark. I lived in a rural area, and I started smelling like a chemical kind of smell, right?
Something opened up.
I thought, oh my gosh, I said probably one of the chemicals busted open or something, But I didn't have any lights in the car at the time, and I didn't have a flashlight, so it didn't me any good to stop. So I just drove as fast as I could the last few miles home or whatever, and then when I got home, I opened the door and I found that it was actually a fire, and it was just kind of smoldering, like, and it was next to the door, and I kind of like just patted out or whatever, and it wasn't until the next day I came out and looked, and that Mother Mary, it was about six inches high. That Mother Mary statue had shrouded that fire. It was like right up against where the seatbelt came down to the floor, and it shrouded that fire and kept it from spreading, because I'm telling you, there was so much stuff in there that was flammable.
Oh, you could have blown up.
Yeah. And it only had a little tiny burn mark, like at the bottom of the Mother Mary. And then I kept it and had it outside, and then miraculously, like, the burn mark came off of it or whatever, But I've seen lots of miracles, but that's just one of them.
I love that. How do these things happen, Adam?
Well, Ruth shared in her own way how powerful faith is, and how that relationship that we build with our own inner divine being, with the divine itself, with God itself. And that's what I am personally finding. That's what I hear from people that I support and work with. And I hear more and more of these stories that are beautiful stories of miracles that are established through a deep presence of faith and a relationship with Spirit, with God, with Jesus, whatever that may be for you. And so that's what I'm hearing from Ruth, and that's what I'm experiencing in my life, and hearing that from many others.
Let's go to Cornelius in Alexandria, Louisiana, a walking miracle as he speaks. Hi, Cornelius.
Hey there, George and Adam. You got a biblical name, and I do too, Mr. Adam. Look, George, I was telling Tommy, and I think that's one of my Ruthies on Coast to Coast, and I got another Ruthie on Coast. And John, that was a great story about his blindness and stuff. I was telling Tommy, George, y'all been praying for me about a money miracle and stuff. So yesterday now, the mailman comes to me and he said, look, here's a check for you and stuff. And it's from the federal government and stuff about COVID-19. And like I said, the audience has been praying for me and stuff. And them people on Reddit, boy, they're a bunch of racists and stuff. They say I try to use the show and all like that, but I don't. So I've sent Tommy my bills and stuff just to show him what I need. But the key to this, Adam, I believe in Christ and stuff. And a lot of our callers and listeners really believe in Christ. God will give you three things. First, he'll say yes to your prayers and stuff, to answered prayer. But the two things that we don't want to hear is wait or no. Those are the two worst things that we can hear from God. And like I said, I just believe in the Coast to Coast audience, and I'm so glad John's going to meet you in person. Barry met you in person. I met you in person. And I just think that just changed my life, George, meeting you and Tommy. Though I wanted to get up to your room, but Tommy was like a security officer. No, Mr. White.
There's no way I'm letting you up into my room.
All right. But God bless you. This is a miracle night. God bless Coast to Coast AM.
You got that right.
Thank you.
Great listeners here, Adam, by the way.
Yeah,
dedicated.
Really enthusiastic and full of love and light, George. What a blessing.
Let's go to Mary in New Jersey. Hello, Mary. Welcome to the program.
George. Hello, Adam. I'm 79 years old, and the recent, couple of years, I started to remember back in my childhood, because I had lost it, and I started to remember it bit by bit. So I remember I was praying to hear the whole Bible, and somebody read that to me, and I wanted to learn how to read it, so I got the Bible, and I went down the alphabet, every word that had an A. I went through the book 7 times. I got up to the letter G. H is a whole total story in its own. But G, it reminds me of the first 7, because it's number 7 in the alphabet, the first 7 days of creation, Genesis, God, the Garden of Eden, right? So I see God's hand in this. Like Christ says, behold, I make all things new. That alphabet was changed in the 1500s. It's a totally new alphabet to us. And then you go over to like 1611 when they made the Bible. That's brand new. And then you come to America. That's new to us. And George Washington and the Constitution. I see God's hand in all this. And, they came here for freedom. And that is freedom, to get to read the Bible and have somebody read it to you and believe the way you want to believe. That is freedom.
I love that. Well done. Well done. Did you ever hear the poem Footprints in the Sand, Adam?
No, I haven't.
It is about somebody. We had Lionel Fanthorpe do it on Christmas for the holidays. But it has to do with someone who believes that God has forsaken him. But read the poem, Footprints in the Sand.
Will do.
You'll love that. Let's go to Frank in Montana. Welcome to the show. Hey, Frank, go ahead, sir.
Hi. Yeah, he's a great guest, and I loved it. I want to say I love Jesus. I love the people who are kind to children. I don't like people who beat their children. That was not Jesus' way. And if you follow his path, there are miracles.
Little kids shouldn't be beaten, that's for sure. Thanks, Frank. Let's go to Cynthia in Massachusetts, east of the Rockies. Go ahead, Cynthia.
Hello. I had a situation with my body. But first of all, I need to inform you that I was traveling on one day, and suddenly I decided to go home because I thought I forgot something. And when I got home and I was parking the car, there's a big bang sound. And I ran into the house. I didn't want to find out what it was. And then found out it was the axle went on my car. I'm glad I didn't go any further, otherwise I would have been in a major accident. And then a couple weeks later after that, I lost eyesight in one eye.
Oh, geez.
And then my sister suggested me to go to the eye doctor, and it was cataracts. So they did the operation, and 2 weeks later they did it on the other eye because that was going to go. And so that in itself was telling me to go home. And then there's times through my life where things like in a car accident, I was sideswiped and I crossed over and I went up a tree, and they said they thought I was dead or crippled up, and I wasn't. But, there's many situations in my life where I think I was God sent, and so it increased my abilities. I have this, it manifests itself with the energy and prayer that I heal people. But I have trouble with the fact that I have pins and needles in my feet and in my writing hand, and I don't know how to cure myself, but I often pray for other people to be healed, and I just don't know how to handle that, or because specialist has told me that situation will always be, that there is no cure for that. I'm just wondering, am I not going into, is there a way or is there not a way?
You with us, Adam?
Yes, I'm here, and I'm happy to share a little bit on that, George, and thank you for sharing that. And there is a way, and the way that I believe that is best offered is something that you're doing to share your gift. As a healer, is so powerful in healing others, but ultimately it must in some way be healing you, I would well imagine. And of course, there's always the practical things of how to take care of ourselves, and we're not speaking to that. But ultimately, the gift of you, the gift of your miracle, is a healing of a miracle for ourselves too, and for everybody. So I'm inspired to hear about your giving and hopefully sharing more of that. I think that's one of the best ways to heal our own personal lives.
Giving seems to do a lot of refreshing things for somebody, doesn't it?
It does, and we know that giving is receiving, and a lot of us actually seeming like all we do is give, and we ask, well, why aren't we getting anything for ourselves? But ultimately, I believe, at least it happened for me, George, when I began giving, but also to open my heart to receive love, to receive the inner peace, God's peace, to receive the light, to receive the miracle. But that is through a place of giving and a committed life, a life of giving and a life of supporting the greater good of all of us. And of course, we're part of all of us, so it uplifts our lives too.
Adam, take 30 seconds to tell folks about your free master's class.
Well, please come over to my website. You can find me at earthkeeperalliance.com or adamhall.solutions. And there I have several offerings, George, not just a couple master classes, but there's several things that you can choose from books on abundance to offerings about learning about your self-assessment. But ultimately, the master's classes are great discovery, a great journey of discovery about your purpose.
That's the way to do it. Adam, thanks again for being on the program. Always look forward to it. For Dan Galante, Tom Danheiser, Lisa Lyon, Lex Lonehood, Sean Ladouceur, Stephanie Smith, Chris Boros, Tim Binnall, George Knapp, and Ian Punnett, I'm George Norrie, somewhere out there on Coast to Coast AM. We'll see you on our next edition. Until then, be safe, everyone.